Well, well, well. Hello, everybody. I'm Anne Richmond, a.k.a. Hearth Singer, the head bard in charge round these parts. And today, I am joined by my friends Emily and Chris to record our weekly podcast, Around the Hearth, the TTRPG talk show where I talk with my besties about role-playing game topics. And that's the show. That's it. I keep on thinking there's more. We're still working on the tagline. It's fine. Emily and Chris, how's your week?
Good.
Hi.
Good.
Smooth transition.
Smooth. I'm
Smooth
a
jazz.
It was a good week. Good week. Very busy week at work. I don't know. I have like nothing interesting to say right now.
Any cool Roll20 stuff that we can know about?
We just launched Companion's Tale today, which
Cool.
I'm really excited about. Companion's Tale by Laura Simpson. It's one of the very first indie, card games developed onto Roll20, fully officially supported. Really groundbreaking game, and we worked with the publisher to make sure that it fit every specification she wanted, and I'm just absolutely thrilled that we did it. I'm very proud.
Yay!
Yeah.
You did it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Chris?
Yes.
How are you?
I'm good. That's all I have to say about that. I don't work at Roll20, so.
I know you don't.
No, I know.
Didn't you? Now, though, something you were working on hobby-wise for a while, weren't you making some sort of character creation system for Legend of the Five Rings? What were you doing?
I mean, the two things that I had been working on.
Oh no, I conflated both of them.
You did. But I mean, the two things I'd been working on is that I basically wanted to convert Legend of the Five Rings to take place in the Avatar universe. So it was less appropriation-y of a setting, and also Avatar's really cool. But I really like Legend of the Five Rings fundamentally. And then the other thing I was working on was more or less just a setting for 5th edition. Loosely based off of Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles.
We should do an episode of this show of what IPs would you want to adapt into role-playing games that aren't already.
Add it to the list.
Add it to the list. If you guys weren't here last week when we talked about our list, we have a list of topics. Emily, I'm gonna trust you to do that, or I'll do it after the show.
I got it. I'll do it.
So, let's talk about what we're doing this week. To homebrew, or not to homebrew? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of your poorly made dice rolls, or to take arms against a book of mechanics and by your homebrew end them. Today, we are gathered to talk in these hallowed halls about commonly forgotten rules, broken rules, rules that are often homebrewed, and frankly, just to tell you what really grinds our gears. Yeah. That's what we're here to do. And if you guys have any questions and you are here in chat with us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Hearthsinger Games, please throw them in the chat. We love to hear from you guys by all means. We have a mixture here of people who play, people who DM, people who do both. And dagnabbit, we all got opinions.
Consarn it.
Yeah, in fact, this topic really bloomed after last week's episode because we kind of touched on some of these elements a little bit. And then I think after last week, we were like, oh, there's a lot more we can dig into there. So
yeah, absolutely. And Chris did a solid here. Chris, whose gears are always ground, did a solid and built out a couple to nubs.
To nubs.
I hate that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I did that to us.
That's okay.
Helped me put together a list of kind of things. We're going to go through them one by one and talk about what the rule actually is, rules as written, and then how people commonly change it and what, there are also just all these rules that people just think do something else. Yeah. Because so many people change them.
And there's a lot of rules that thematically make sense, but that's just not how it works.
Yeah. Let's talk about flanking. Back in 4th edition, if two players or two creatures that were fighting on the same side stood on opposite sides of a creature they were attacking, you could get advantage. That was flanking. Now, that has transitioned to simply a suggested potential homebrew rule in the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yeah.
Without me sharing my strong feelings about this, Chris, how do you feel about flanking? Do you like it? Do you hate it?
I think that so flanking just at its base form, like I feel can be. I think maybe the reason they got rid of it is because it can be abused very easily. That is like one of those things where it's like, okay, like a rogue, like by design, like a rogue is like, do you have an ally within 5 feet of the thing you're fighting? Well, then you get sneak attack. And I feel like a lot of the simplification that they did in 5th edition is taking rules that used to be global for everyone and baking them into the flavor of a specific class. And I think that the way that sneak attack works in this, which is a lot more accessible, but like now that's the rogue thing. Like if someone is helping you fight things, then you can be more tactical, right?
Well, it's also the pack tactics thing. If you're a wolf.
Yeah, exactly. And like I support those kinds of rules, but it's weird. It would be weird to in the system as it exists, I think that flanking is far too abusable, because when you're not thinking about like the role play of the situation and everything, if you're thinking about like, is there an ally within 5 feet of the same target? Then there's like no reason to not gang up, because then everyone gets advantage all the time.
Now, technically, keep in mind that flanking raw, as in the suggested rule in the Dungeon Master's Guide, is actually, it does stipulate that you have to be on exactly opposite sides. Whereas all the rogue stuff, especially the swashbuckler stuff, where you get advantage if somebody is simply within 5 feet of the creature, they could be next to you. Doesn't really matter. So it is slightly different. Some might argue, I guess, that if you use flanking rules, then it's cool because it makes you think about where you are around a creature more, and I think that that's true, but I'm mostly on the side, I think, Chris, that you are, that I think it's cooler if certain people get certain cool things instead of everyone getting everything.
Also, like, just the last thing I was going to say about it is
sorry.
No, it's okay. It's I don't like it in 5th edition specifically. I don't like it as a rule, but I do support the use of like tactical play that would afford that bonus circumstantially, as opposed to just having it just be like a blanket rule, because then it's just a little too.
There's so many things that grant you advantage, things that other players can do for you. It's like at some point,
and like
sometimes you don't hit.
Maybe
that's the rule.
Maybe if the thing that you're targeting is grappled.
No, that's a trick question. We'll come to it later.
Okay.
Emily, do you have any very specific thoughts on...
My only real thoughts about flanking are that no matter how long we've been playing 5th edition, I will always position a character near an enemy that is positioned near another character and think that good is going to come of that. Like, this is one that's really hard to like write out of my code. Like, I will almost always feel like the act of flanking grants me some benefit, even though I know the rule of flanking doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And to that end, though, my homebrew for that situation is that if Emily takes that active choice to position herself tactically in combat, I should reward her for those decisions. And that might not necessarily be exactly in the way of flanking, but I would definitely homebrew in something to reward her for creative play.
It's interesting because I do think players are rewarded by doing that because they're focusing fire.
Yeah, well,
like
that's the biggest
problem. If you go to hit something that somebody else is hitting, odds are, mechanically speaking, you had a great idea.
Yeah.
You know? And you're rewarded for that kind of play by the creature dying. I don't need to extra reward you. And this is I won't call it an argument. I will call it a passionate discussion that Chris and I have from time to time, where Chris says it's impossible to kill you, and I say it's really not. You know? But a lot of it is because I really tamp down on just offering the advantages that you offer us when you're being nice.
Fair. Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is that it's, I think that in general, in the interest of the power fantasy, when dealing with like a DM who's interested in creating a balanced experience. Players are just really overtuned, and that is by design. But that is the problem. Like, I always bring up the example of like one of the first big campaigns I played in 5th edition. I had 4 casters and a monk, and they were so front loaded that combat generally didn't go more than 2 rounds. Like, if we got to round 3, like, there was a serious problem. But
Know-It-All has said, and I think this is a cool idea from chat, that he saw a neat variant rule that if you flank an enemy who is using a shield, they only get the shield bonus against the enemy that is in front of them.
Yeah.
Which is cool. But I also, yes. So yes, I think that's cool. If I were to be able to remember to use it, I absolutely would.
Yeah.
But I think about that guy who does the TikToks where he shows you what a 5 foot by 5 foot square is and like how you use it, and how I just think, you know, your 6 seconds isn't just like, and then it's over. It's looking at where things are. It's just the hit. Did you land a hit in that 5 seconds, if that makes sense? Or 6 seconds, rather. Shiznit says, I like it in the strict terms of the person being on the other side. Because if you are surrounded as someone who has been on a street fight, okay.
Right.
Good to know about Shiz. Everybody watch out.
Flex.
He's hardcore.
Everybody,
hardcore.
Hands on site.
Catch these hands. You can't focus on 2 targets at the same time, so the other person not in my periphery vision gets advantage.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I think it makes sense. It makes sense.
I 100% agree with tactical advantage when surrounding your opponent, but I disagree with rules as written flanking.
Yeah.
And I think it should be more situational.
Yeah, and also Know-It-All points out there is some logic behind what Shiz is saying, but his biggest issue is that it makes character abilities and spells seem weaker. Like Rogue's Mastermind help action and spells like Fairy Fire are now not as powerful because we're just granting advantage anytime anyone stands. And and I
to my point,
that,
right?
Yeah, to our initial point.
Like what we were originally saying,
Yeah. That the rules are the way they are to help you make people seem good at what they're supposed to be good at.
Yeah.
You know? Okay, I think we've covered flanking. We don't like it. No. And anyone in this chat who engages in flanking is out. No, I'm kidding. Do what you want at your table, but not at mine. No, I'm kidding.
But no flanking.
Drinking a potion, rules as written, versus as a bonus action. So typically, drinking a potion takes an action to do. So you could move, you could drink a potion, and then do a bonus action. I have feelings about this, so I'm gonna talk about them. Then I'm gonna turn it over to you guys. I feel like I like making it count as an action, in that like you're using an ability or an ability like thing. But I do feel that it really slows everything down, and so many times it basically weakens the effect of your potion because you lose, quote unquote, lose a turn to drinking your potion, and then that if you're the one being focused on, that just goes away immediately the next round. So I like making it that as a bonus action you can drink your own potion, and then as an action you can feed somebody else a potion, because that would take more. Have you ever tried to pour water carefully down someone's throat?
Shall we do a demonstration live on Twitch?
Yeah. I'll go get a glass of water. And then I'll try to administer it to Emily without spilling it all over her.
And we'll decide what is an action.
I'll just baby bird in the water.
It's a different stream. That's in just chatting. Entirely. Let me know when you're. Sorry, were you
that's
done?
It.
Oh,
no,
okay.
That's basically it. Okay. Please take the floor.
Mr.
Christopher.
So I harken back to the days when Dungeons and Dragons like action economy was far more granular. And I think about things like, okay, so back in the day, in previous editions, I should say, we had things like, it took actions or bonus actions or whatever to like take out your weapons, put away your weapons, switch from my sword to my bow, and things like that. And it just led to those sort of rule. And this is why I like 5th edition in general, because it sort of hand waves a lot of that minutia to just make playing easier, to wrap your head around.
Cinematic choices.
Exactly, and so more cinematic. And I think about how, like, in old editions, you'd have like nonsense situations where, like, okay, well, I really want to shoot the guy with my bow on this turn, but it takes an action for me to put my weapons away, and then another action for me to take my bow out, and then I gotta shoot him. So I'm just gonna drop my weapons on the floor because it doesn't take an action to drop my weapons on the floor. And then it's like, okay, well, now your sword is just laying on the floor. The enemy grabs it, or you walk away from it, and it just creates all this nonsense. And to that end, I mean, I feel like all my answers are going to be, it's situational, you know, but also,
but I think what's helpful, right? Yeah. Because our goal is always to leave you with things you can take away. We don't want to
don't worry. I'm going to get to that.
Yeah. We're going to talk about why it's situational and why it, like what the give and take is, right?
I think much like in like a JRPG where you can heal every turn, but the enemy is doing as much damage to you every turn as you're healing for. So you guys are just caught in an endless loop where you never actually get a chance to do anything because you're just focused entirely on keeping yourself alive. And a similar paradox, to that end, I think bonus action is fine. Like,
yeah. I also think the other aspect of it is just that, especially when we're talking about the lowest levels, like 50 gold is a lot of gold.
Yeah.
The typical cost of your rules as written healing potion is 50 gold. Wow. Now, a lot of times, Chris, I'm not naming names, decides that because we're just starting out, it should cost more because we're far away from town, and that's fine. I don't have strong feelings about it.
I like the idea of potions being rare, but I just also want to inject the thought that in my game specifically, the amount of times that people have taken healing potions in combat is next to zero.
That's crazy. That's always when I'm taking them.
No, like
I'd be slamming them back.
Because there's always healers. I mean, like, at least in my experience, there's often healers around, and people generally don't have the time to take healing potions. And if they did, maybe they've hidden. So that it being a full action is like not as important.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, like, for me, the healing potions, especially at low levels, cost so much money that if you're going to force them to be used on actions and they really feel like they don't do anything, then why buy healing potions? It's kind of like, even though there's totally a reason they are saving your life, right? Like, that's what it starts to feel like. Like, why do I
kind of, as a character who plays a lot of healers, I always tend to fall into this loop where the potion never seems worth it to spend. Because I usually have like at least a spell slot to use on what we need. It's like very rare that we're in such a dire situation that we bust out the health potions. And as such, like, I'll just never prioritize buying them because they're so expensive. It
also really depends on like how deep the delve is.
Well,
don't laugh like that, Anne. Oh my God, this is a kid show.
I've never run a D&D camp, or maybe only one time have I ever run a D&D campaign where my players have been in a situation where they have to get through multiple rounds of multiple combat encounters without at least a short rest.
Right. And that, I don't think that's as common as it is at your table, in my experience. No, I think you tend to create these. We've talked about this a lot of the time because you want to kind of like finish stuff off, and so oftentimes at the detriment of your own encounters, you will simplify them so that we can finish on time. You know what I mean? And sometimes that stuff drags you into areas where you would have to.
And sometimes those three goblins just run away.
It's true. Sometimes they do.
For another hour.
Chris, did you do something with your
you just got
headset?
really soft.
You got very quiet. No.
I've changed nothing. Hold on. How about now?
Chris is off the show.
You kicked off, kid. You didn't make the cut. No.
I just got really quiet?
Yeah.
Yeah, you just got very quiet. You just disappeared into the... Did you turn your mic off, maybe? I'm going to do this for editing later. Hold on.
What about
No. What's up, Patch and Sniff? Best name ever.
Talk amongst yourselves. I'll...
Sure. We'll continue on our way.
Twitch is just trying to counterbalance to ensure that the voices of women are twice as loud as the voices of the man in the room.
Yeah, I've taken up enough space.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Okay, so I think we pretty much covered potion stuff. Your reaction to it as a healer though is interesting, because I do play healers from time to time, but I just hate healing so much that I do everything but, unless it's strictly necessary.
Yeah, I think I realized I didn't exactly address the question of like bonus action versus action, but the logic applies the same. Like I just never prioritize a potion.
When you're looking, I mean, you're looking at action economy and you're looking at cost of item, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely a difficult thing to do. Strange DOS, welcome. Thanks so much for that follow. Welcome to the Baby Bars. Thanks for sticking around, guys. We are 15 people away from 1,000 subs, and I just don't know how to handle that kind of joy. Let's scroll up though. Hello. Thank you for waving. Chris, no, it's the same.
Is that a wave? I've always interpreted that emoji as like a...
Yeah, that's what I feel like. It's like a hello, I salute thee. From the chat, I call on to thee. Know-it-all said a couple of things. One related to what you just said is, but if Emily uses a bonus action to drink a potion, then she won't be able to use spiritual weapon.
Listen,
and that
look
is
at
fair.
me. Do I look like the kind of healer that uses spiritual weapon? Because the answer is I'm not.
No. How about now? Is that better?
You're perfect.
You're perfect
What'd you change?
Okay. I think I hit a hotkey that automatically adjusted my mic volume, and it was like, "You're a white male. You don't need to talk."
I love that key.
I love that key.
Just hit the privilege key.
It's the straight white male key.
Amazing.
It just lowers the volume to the point of incomprehensible.
Queen's Gambit reclined. Welcome. Thank you so much for that follow. Welcome to the Baby Bards. The other thing that Know-It-All pointed out, and I just wanted to put it out there because it seems like a great gifty poo for our favorite kobold companion in our campaign. He says, my solution is I crafted a nifty magical item called an injector gauntlet. You can slot in a couple of potions and then inject them.
I don't want to think about it.
Emily hates it. I don't want to say anything more than that, but I think it's cool.
I mean, if you're an artificer, fine.
Which they are.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
Well, can't we go with like healing tablets?
Can we go with like the patch?
Them?
Can we do like?
No, I don't like patches either.
Oh, you don't like patches? Damn. Okay.
What is? Okay.
How about like a salve? How about like a salve? Like a cream.
But
apply...
how do you apply that to somebody from like it quickly?
I mean, you apply. I mean, applying a salve. Applying a salve to someone's arm would arguably take more or less time than trying to pour water. May I, do a demo on Emily real quick?
I want a gack gun that just shoots Nickelodeon gack at the back of somebody's head.
Oh God.
Hopefully they're not Danny Tamborelli, in which case they'll be drinking it anyway.
Yeah. Gack.
I remember.
Gotta have it.
Remember Floam?
It sounds like.
Remember Floam?
This is not what this show is about, but I'm ready for it.
Remember? I remember.
I remember.
Moving on.
Amazing. Magical eye drops offers Know-It-All.
Yeah, as long as you don't confuse them with the nail glue.
Yeah, as long as you don't confuse them with nail glue.
Strange DOS also says that the 07, the wave thing, came from, they think, Eve, and is a wave or a salute. But IDK, I'm a boomer, they say. IDK, I am boomer. I love the combination of IDK and boomer in a sentence is really great. An artificer could have a gack gun, and I agree, and I would like one at your earliest convenience.
Guild Wars 2 had a gack gun, but anyway. But at the end of the day, I don't, at least in my experience, I don't feel that healing potions are such an integral part of combat to apply to oneself that that has ever been a point of contention for me.
Disagree.
Yeah,
but
hard to disagree.
I'm
Once
really
again,
happy for you.
Your mileage might vary. But the only time I ever see healing potion use in combat is generally to revive someone when there's no healing magic to be had.
You know what I will tell you is that the thing that I use it the most on is when I'm in a dungeon delve and like everybody is being so careful, or you get separated from somebody and you're by yourself, or somebody else, you know, has to get somebody else up off the ground first or something like that. And I don't know why I find myself in those situations, but a lot of the pre-written campaigns, if you play them as written, you end up going through just rounds and rounds of halls and rooms, and it's just like, how will we ever get out of there? Like when we were doing Storm King's Thunder and we were in the fire giant hold that just like went on forever.
I'll be perfectly honest with you. I have abbreviated every delve that I have ever run because dungeons are too damn long. Who wants to do combat for 8 hours? Not me. I mean, your mileage might vary, but like my table does not enjoy drudging through combat while light on resources, casting Eldritch Blast every turn with no reprieve. That is not that is not interesting.
It can be really rough.
For me personally.
It can be really rough.
So that's kind of where I'm at.
1 second. We are down on the music. I gotta restart it. Boom. It's on. It's coming back.
Yeah. I mean, whatever. I could go on about that a little bit more, but I don't want to.
No, I mean, I think we can talk about like what makes a good session can be another show. I think. Like, what's an exciting session?
Just gonna keep snowballing these topics. Wait,
so
what was the one I was supposed to put in the list before? I'm not doing well as secretary around the hearth.
What are good topics for D&D conversations?
That's not what it was.
No, that's literally. God damn it, Chris.
Right?
I don't know, man.
Chat, help us out.
It'll come back to us.
Yeah, what was it?
I will not take part in any kind of rule breaking, says Proxy Breakdown.
Like, I literally had a group where it was like, I was trying to run something that I'd never run before, but it ended up being so like delve heavy, and they were all new players, and they had like door phobia, and it was like a meme that like all we did was walk through doors and fight things, and that was Dungeons and Dragons, and I was like, I shall not allow that. But
were the doors like pretty or cool looking?
I mean, sadly. Sadly, no. I had to get creative with my door use. Like, well, what it was is that the doors were all very generic, and then they knew when they came upon a special door or perhaps a double door even, that was cause for, excitement.
Mimic doors, says Know-It-All. That's a way to really keep them in there when they don't want to be. So the most recent thing that we came up with for a topic is, what does the shape of a good D&D session look like? Not like what's a good one-shot. Like what makes a fun 2 to 3 hour game. That'll go on the list.
Was that the one from before?
No, it wasn't.
It was not. There was a first one, and I do not recall. But it's okay.
Yeah, we'll try and come up with it again. I'll be listening to this literally later tonight, and then I'll tell you what it was. Okay, let's talk about grapple. The worst rule in D&D.
The worst rule. Hot take.
It is the worst.
Wrong answers only, which means you think you have the right one. Yeah. The only person who's not allowed to answer this question is Know-It-All Sci Guy in chat. What do you think the rules for grapple are?
I.e., what happens to you when you are grappled?
Yeah. When you're grappled, what do you think the effect is?
I want to hear Patch and Sniff's perspective on this.
Yeah. Patch and Sniff, tell us. We're gonna don't ask me why, Know-It-All. Just because I already know that you and I have had this conversation. That's why you're not allowed to answer. Like if you were to ask to grapple somebody, what are you hoping will happen as a result? Proxy says rule number 1, just head to Goldshire. I mean, standard.
Fair.
Only if you're on Moonguard though. So I will tell you that every time I have ever asked to grapple until I recently reviewed this rule, every single time I've A, had to look it up, and B, I've intended to stop somebody and hold them. That is what grappling somebody actually means in the English language.
I think it's funny that you think that D&D consults the English language in determining how their rules work. But please.
Now, Strange Doss says, without looking, I think you're basically immobilized, and you start taking damage if they want you to.
Oh, yeah, you wish.
You wish.
You wish.
That's too much.
One wishes.
You wish that it hampered their ability to act in any way, shape, or form. Because if I have a guy in a full Nelson, perhaps.
Patch and Sniff says, I hold them close. If they fall, if they move, I move. If they fall, I fall. If they say uncle, I win.
Yeah, I wish.
That's also, honestly, that's the closest to what it is.
That is the closest, yeah.
All that happens when you successfully grapple somebody. Chris, will you look up the rule for me real quick?
Yeah, I mean, according to like the DM's screen, all that happens when you grapple someone, the only debuff that it reflects on them is that they are immobilized. But rule in the book, grappling is when you want to grab a creature or wrestle with it, you can use an attack action to make a special melee attack a grapple. If you're able to make multiple attacks with the attack action, this attack replaces one of them. I actually didn't know that. The target of your grapple must be no more than one status category larger than you and must be within your reach. Using at least one free hand, you try to seize the target by making a grapple check instead of an attack roll. A strength athletics check contested by the target's strength athletics or dexterity acrobatics check. The target loses the ability. The target chooses which ability to use. You succeed automatically if the target is incapacitated. If you succeed, the subject... you subject the target to the grappled condition. The condition specifies that the things that can end it, and you can release the target whenever you like. No action required. And being grappled only means that your speed is zero. That is all that means.
It doesn't restrain you in any way. It doesn't give other people advantage against you. It just means if you tried to leave me and I grabbed you, you just stay there.
Yeah.
But can you imagine, like, let's say you're a monk and you're, like, grappled, but you could still just, like...
Yeah, you just wear them like a fucking back.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
That's the
You're
thing.
accomplishing nothing.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're a halfling and you're grappling an orc, that slightly makes sense, but, like...
No, it's like you're holding onto their leg like a toddler.
Yeah, I've seen the Wolverine fight the Hulk. Like... I know what that looks like, and he's slightly, well, first off, his speed's not zero, but he you know, it's, I don't know, man. It's just sort of strange because it doesn't even inflict incapacitated, which would make more sense because not incapacitated, restrained. Because restrained at least imparts disadvantage on their attack rolls and disadvantage on dexterity.
So I will say, due to this, at my table, grapple means their speed is zero and they are restrained. You roll opposing strength. You roll your attack. You can grab them and get their speed zero, but then you roll opposed strength checks. And if you fail that, go back. You do the attack, the special melee attack to grapple, and then once you are holding on to them, they roll a strength save. And if they save, you wrap your arms around them, and they are restrained. Does that make sense?
Oh, wait, sorry. You're saying that's what you wish it was?
That's what I do at my table. That's my homebrew for it. Because gives... We'll get to this later, but it gives people who do happen to focus on strength an ability to get out of a grapple, right? That, like, an advantage to not be grappled, which you would have if you were extra lorg or extra strong, right? And it also gives you a chance that, like, if you are grappling, it's not too powerful because you can miss on the ability to, like, hold them and restrain them. You can just kind of, like, hold them up for a second.
Well,
so that's what I do.
Someone comments that is now a feat called grappler. Mechanically, that exact thing is grappler. Right,
but I hear that.
Oh, no, you're just saying you like it as baseline.
I just like it as baseline. I just feel like grapple is too weak otherwise. Why would I ever attempt to do that unless I had the feat?
And it's very clear that Wizards is aware of that fact because they keep on adding, like, well, like in 4th edition, there were Paragon paths and, like, prestige classes and stuff that focus on, and, like, the spiked armor and all that focuses on trying to buff grappling. But at the end of the day, if you're a barbarian who can do barbarian things, and why would you ever want to grapple someone and do a D4 damage per turn by hugging them really hard? That is a complete waste of your options.
It's a complete waste of your action economy. And, like, the fact is, when somebody who hasn't played the game before says, I want to grapple that person, I know what they intend.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
They're like,
exactly.
can I grab him?
Yeah.
Make a grapple check. Guess what? You got basically nothing. Like that feels so shitty to waste your attack and not do damage.
Yeah.
And just grab them.
Turns out
it's a special. It's a special melee attack, which doesn't mean you do damage. Instead of doing damage, you just make their speed 0. Like it's so dumb. Emily, do you have any other thoughts on this before we move on? Before I explode?
I don't need to go into any particular detail here, because everyone has communicated my thoughts. It's dumb. It's a waste of a turn.
By the way, apparently the grappler feat is crappier than that because both you and your grapple target are restrained because you basically like pin him onto the ground, and that's even worse. It is altogether not great.
I don't think I have ever grappled someone. Know-it-all Psy Guy who asks, Emily, "Have you ever grappled someone?" Like Emily probably has grappled a human in life.
Yeah.
Depending on the circumstances.
What is a hug if not a grapple?
My characters, on the other hand,
passionate grapple,
have not been known to do a grapple.
Yeah. I will tell you that I the next time I want to hug, I'm going to be like, "Can I have a grapple?"
And I'm going to hug you and I'm going to say, "Your speed is now 0.
Yeah, your speed is now 0.
I can't wait.
But the love has advantage. I don't know that one.
Yeah.
Something like that.
You know what? We'll fix that in post. I think it's great. I like your take on this. Who's Ann? That's me. Because even with my bad luck in high school wrestling, I promise I grapple you. You are now a pretzel.
Yeah, I mean,
sure, that makes sense. Yeah. So,
well
bye,
said.
Emily. All right, let's move on.
So eloquent too. Man.
I was reading. Critical successes don't exist for saving throws or skills. This is a hard truth.
It is.
Because sometimes, I'm not
or
a
initiative while we're at it.
Yeah. I'm not a robber of joy. I love for people to be excited about the dice that they're rolling, the scores on those dice. But if you're not attacking, it ain't a crit.
Yeah, but like, okay.
I knew I could depend on you.
Listen. When you are a player and you roll a natural 20, you deserve a reward. That's what I'm going to say. Like, I understand that the rules as written say that you cannot crit on a skill check. I get it. But I do feel like in that insanely rare scenario where you roll the 20, something has to happen to reward that 20.
Right.
And what is the difference between that and a crit? Like, I mean, a crit definitely hits, right? But at least in terms of how the crit gets integrated into gameplay, it usually means not only do you definitely hit and do double damage or whatever, it also means that, like, your character did something especially awesome in order to achieve said effect. So what is the harm in if someone, like, where is there a scenario? Tell me where there's a scenario where someone is rolling a skill check and they rolled a nat 20 and they don't succeed. Just give me an example.
An example would just be like if there's simply sorry, I'm having a hard time thinking.
If the check is too high.
Yeah, well, not only is if the check is too high, but
that are so high, right? Because of who the person is, or if it's like, I want to hug that god. It's like, that god doesn't want to hug you.
Okay, all right, listen. Wait. No, stop.
Okay,
listen.
fine.
So, let's say...
Go ahead and hug your god. I'm sorry.
Your player says, I would like to roll to hug the god. Do you, as the DM, say, roll for it?
No, but right. So that's I gave you an intense description. Right? Like that's not that was just like the first thing off the top of my head. But sometimes there are skill checks that are near impossible, but I know they could potentially do it.
They could potentially do it, but a nat 20 doesn't do it?
No.
Not unless they have enough of a bonus to their skill.
So it is achievable. I'm purposefully pushing back on this. It is achievable. But if, like, their skill is like a +2 and they needed a 25,
Yeah.
but a nat 20 is technically a 22.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead. Sorry.
Why? Like, I understand mathematically that is not a success, but what is the benefit to gameplay of that not being a success?
I would argue
in an extreme scenario.
So let's pick a slightly more plausible extreme scenario, right? You are currently trying to
hugging a god isn't success.
So let's say that there's like whatever. There's a jarl in this town. You guys want a favor from him, and you're trying to roll persuasion to convince him it's a good idea. But you just
Emily, we did it. We got Chris to run a game for us. What's happening?
But you just murdered his wife, and he knows you did. He watched you do it. Rolling a nat 20 is not going to convince him that he's going to help you. I don't care what you say. So that's an intense.
So again, like, you as the GM still let them roll for a situation that is like
impossible.
I guess you're right, but the thing is I feel personally that quick question for the purposes of my example. Does it say anywhere in the rules that rolling a 20 to hit someone with an attack automatically hits?
Yeah, I think so.
Does it?
I don't know.
I don't know. I'm just a player.
because there is nothing in the rules that says that a 20 automatically succeeds, because as we're talking about, it doesn't. So I don't think there's anything in the rules that say that a 20 automatically hits, because I like the idea of allowing a player to roll, having them roll really high, and then using the fact that they still fail as a dramatic device, right? If you're going up against a really strong opponent, if you're going up against a really strong opponent, right? Let's say the party is relatively low level, but one of your party members has a god complex and it's just won a bunch of battles and thinks that they're a badass. You roll up on a dragon. There's absolutely no way mathematically even that player could hit them, because like whatever, the dragon's got 27 AC and you only have a +4 to hit, right? I think it's a cool thing that it's like, okay, go ahead and roll. And they're like, nat 20. And I was like, cool, you roll in there and your sword bounces off of his scales, right? Being able to use that as a dramatic device, I think, is important.
Sure. I'm with you. I think that using it to show
Know-it-all Saigai has said that it's right. If the D20 roll for an attack is 20, the attack hits regardless of any modifiers or the target's AC. So by that token, all I'm saying is, why do we let players invest energy and rolls in scenarios
trying to do
where
things
they
can't
absolutely could never succeed?
Yeah.
The whole point of the 20 is supposed to be, and you can explain it with RP, like it can be like maybe not the 100% success that they may envision, but if you think about it a little bit more like other gameplay mechanics where there's like bestial successes and stuff like that, where there's like you succeed but like a weird thing happens
at a cost. I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's kind of where I was gonna go with it, is that like 20s, and it's come through the chat a couple of times, right? Like 20s, good rolls deserve good things. And it doesn't mean that like you get exactly what you wanted, but it could teach you something you need to know. It could give you some kind of knowledge that's going to be helpful that the group needs to actually hurt them.
Like the example in chat that Know-it-all Saigai gave is the barbarian with the 9 in intelligence is never going to decipher the encrypted text of the cult, even on a nat 20. Well, maybe they can't decipher the encrypted text, but maybe on the nat 20 they discover like a journal page where someone had been doing the deciphering, and like they find, you know what I mean, like there's ways around it.
So so to that point, like there was some sage wisdom that I read somewhere once, that it was, don't have a player roll a die unless you're prepared for them to both succeed and fail, right? If you don't want him to decipher the book, then don't have him roll. Be like, you don't know what this language, you can't read it, and you don't find any notes that help you out, whatever. But the thing is that this also brings up my biggest problem with Dungeons & Dragons, and that is how the rules as written have no gray area for success or failure. It's binary. Did you roll high enough? Yes, you succeed, and you succeed exactly how you intended. Did you roll low? Then you fail, and nothing happens whatsoever. And
there are other games that we've brought up a couple of times on the show, on the pod, that there are games like the Star Wars RPG and I guess Vampire has them as well, where you succeed at a cost or you fail with an advantage. And I think it's important to kind of bake that in because, like Chris says, the binary isn't really that fun.
I hate it.
Not for anybody who wants an interesting situation. Everything becomes very much like, I mean, you can start out that way, right?
And it's clear that they've designed the game that way too, because they made an active choice to have 20s always hit in combat because missing sucks, and succeeding dramatically. Like, rolling a 20 in combat is the only thing in the rules that has it where rolling of a certain value causes you to succeed with any more fidelity than anything else in the game. This is rules as written. Obviously, your RP is different.
Yeah.
But like, it's like Emily says, like, if that's the way for combat, then why shouldn't it be that way for skill checks? And I will always reward a player for rolling a 20 for skill checks, but at the same time, and this is a gripe of mine, is that people will fight tooth and nail to have it count that I will say that players will fight tooth and nail to have it be like, well, I rolled a 20, I must succeed, and DMs will be like, you can't critically hit on a 20, but then when they roll a 1, you're like, you stab yourself in the junk. And I'm so tired of that crap, because there's also nothing in the rules that says that if you roll a 1, anything catastrophic happens. It just means that you fail automatically. That's it.
Yeah.
So stop inventing bad things for your players, but then denying them of the good things.
The good stuff.
There was no such thing as a critical failure on skill checks. Stop having people stab themselves in the stomach when they were trying to stab the book. Stop it.
So
sorry.
No,
we're all clearly very passionate about this subject.
Very passionate about rules. And it's okay. Shh, sweet baby. It's gonna be great. No, I agree with you, and I think the big thing to keep in mind when you are pushing people through these scenarios is, like, you don't want to make the game making it hard for them arbitrarily. Like, this kind of goes in with something else that I think is important, but that is kind of probably a topic for another show to dive into, but is the fact that when you make stuff arbitrarily and constantly difficult for a party without rewarding them with, like, moments of respite and joy and fun and zaniness, like, that becomes one note and unfun. Because if I'm trying to be a hero and literally you give me hard choices to make and every choice results in something awful happening, like, I'm gonna stop trying to make any choices at all. Because that's what it becomes, and it's kind of the same with when you continually punish them, but you're not willing to reward them. Then you're creating the same dichotomy.
Yeah, don't put your players in a situation where you are forcing yourself to punish them, right? Like, we want to follow the rules, so you feel like you want to constantly be asking your players to make skill checks because that you want to roll dice in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
But if you are constantly asking them to make skill checks for things where their success or failure are just kind of not really important. Like, if they want to do X and you think it would be cool for them to do X, then just when they say they do it, just let them do it. Because otherwise you're putting yourself in a situation where it's like, okay, let's say that I've been setting up the whole session for the players to get to this room, and it's like an ancient mage's library, and his familiar is hanging out there, and I want them to talk to the familiar and find out all this cool stuff and have that be fun and silly. And then
let them get there.
And then I'm like, okay, cool. You find the familiar. Why don't you roll a handle animal to see if it likes you? And then they fail. Then they don't get to hang out with the familiar. Why did I do that?
Why would I think that's a really commonly made error for first time.
So it's like, cool, I just screwed myself out of being able to allow my players to engage in this world because I hinged a decision on a dice roll that really didn't need to be there.
The other thing that I wanted to bring up is the idea that there's another option for critical failures is to create kind of almost like layer actions that only trigger when players critical failure, but also layer successes that, like, something in the environment goes their way on a critical success, which allows you to create a little bit more dynamic mechanics about, like, the room they're in, and that can be fun. And I may or may not be working on a project regarding just that thing. So keep yourselves posted. Now, we've talked about binary margin of success. Let's talk about something that I was talking about right before the show, and Emily was like, save it for the show, and I was like, oh, don't you worry.
It's true.
I can get fired up again. So strength checks versus athletics checks. When a DM says, when I'm like, I'm the paladin, I bust down the door, and they're like, make a strength check. I'm like, no, let me make an athletics check. Why did I pick something to be proficient in if I'm almost never going to use it unless I'm like running or swimming? Like it just doesn't feel good to be asked to roll a straight +3 or +4 to something. I think it's dumb. And so that is why I argue all the time to let beefy bros and gals and non-binary pals roll their athletics check when it comes up time, because when you think about how many skills are attached to each of the different attributes, there are so many that are attached to other things. There's like 1 for strength and 1 for constitution. So if you're the tank, you feel shitty at literally everything else all the time. So let them roll the athletics check. I know it's not always strictly the thing, but I feel like it, for me, I always let them, and I appreciate being asked. It's just nice to be asked.
My favorite, I think it's an optional rule in the DMG, although maybe I just invented it, but my favorite like house rule that I do is allowing you to use replaceable stats for skill checks, because like you said, there is 1 skill associated with strength. So unless you're running a super combat heavy encounter, that barbarian's sitting around on his hands a lot because there's literally nothing he can actively engage in. See binary success and failure. But that being said, I like translatable skills. So like, for example, okay, the barbarian wants to intimidate that guy. That is a charisma based check. But if he does it by shattering the table that he's sitting at, that is a strength based intimidation. And I do those kinds of things all the time. And like and I've even gotten to the point where I've asked my players that are like, can I do X? And I was like, okay, well, I know that you're a strength-based character, so can you think of a way that you would use your strength to achieve that skill goal? And if you can give me a good reason, then go nuts.
One of my favorite, this is like tangential to what we're talking about, but
it's fine.
If I could bring up another system for a moment, and this sounds pointed because the system I'm bringing up is the Bright system that's used in Burn Bright, which is the Roll20 original game.
Oh, now
listen, I promise I'm not like go buy Burn Bright. Like this is just one of the things that I think Burn Bright does so well is every like skill check, you tell the game master what skill you're using to do the thing. And as long as you can explain how that skill is contributing to the check that you're making, then that's the check that you make. So there's a lot of freedom there to do things like intimidate someone by breaking the table versus intimidate someone by using vocabulary that they don't understand. Right? Like I love having that kind of flavorful freedom. And I think like at least at the tables where we play, there is an element of that we just bring into the games, as Chris is just explaining. Having that flexibility is technically a homebrew rule, but one that I think contributes a lot more to the creativity of your players than saying everything is black and white based on how the skills are written.
Totally. I think we've made our point. Guys, Chris has simply written here, I miss Paragon paths.
I do.
Tell us more, Chris.
I do. I miss that sort of like tiered player growth, and it happens at level 3 now, where you get to pick your specializations, but that is more geared towards like passing the tutorial level and being able to pick your class in earnest, just like in like, you know, being a corruption warlock or whatever in World of Warcraft. But I really missed prestige classes and paragon paths, because I really like there being like a tier where your character just like graduates into a new depth of power, or becomes a master in something. I mean, everyone in Avatar did it. I mean, you know, Sokka trained with his master and got his meteorite sword. That was his paragon path quest line. And I think that those things can be really, I think it's just focusing the story back on the player's growth within the world and not just their path through the narrative is a super important tool. And it makes me sad that it is no longer baked into the rules in any real way. And like, I can't believe that they even got rid of prestige class is to keep it more, you know, old school. But Yeah, I miss them terribly because they were a huge thing for how I weaved games, and
there are
maybe
some good DM's Guild prestige class things
Yeah,
that you
yeah,
can
yeah.
get. So they're not like unattainable these days, but they aren't something that Wizards is pushing in any sense. So I mean, it's definitely a consideration. And if you are somebody who focuses more, or a table that focuses more on front story, then having that opportunity for everybody to kind of like reinvest in who their character is becoming can be really, really important. And another way to do it is just by multi-classing.
Yeah,
like,
well,
if that is another way to do it, and get kind of that same feel. Of course, it means you don't get the benefits of your like, later
multi-classing
class
always feels the opposite of epic to me. But...
Yeah, it feels like going backwards because you're just like, cool, I get level 1 abilities at level 8. Yay.
Yeah, there have been times where I've done it and I've been like, I shouldn't have done that. There's times, and then there's other times where I do it and I'm like, oh my god, this is the special Mama's special sauce.
For me, I feel like multi-classing is more designed, at least personally, is more designed to help people create, like, when you're just creating, like, okay, we're doing this one shot, this campaign, we're starting at level 8, you know. Then you can build that character up. But when you're like starting at level 1 or level 3 and a slow grind, having to invest a level in a multi-class really kind of feels like a waste of a turn.
But what I will tell you though is that when you let it rest for long enough, right? Like, you got to let it sit in the oven. But like, we now have, because of feats and everything else, our wizard in Strahd, who started out as a rogue, is now able to like cast cantrips as sneak attacks. Like, it's crazy. It's great. It's really cool. But that happened over time and has made that player a little bit more like powerful. And there were absolutely times leading up until then where that player was like, man, everybody's getting all this cool stuff and I'm just not, it just hasn't come to fruition yet. So it does take more time. And there is always that like two roads diverged in a yellow wood like feeling to it. It's like, and I picked the one less traveled by, or whatever it is. I don't know. Is that it? I picked the one less traveled by. Is that the quote? Did I do it?
Sure. Why not?
Sure. And then no one's going down that road. Maybe there's a reason that they don't.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just something to consider, that if you want something to feel cool immediately, you might feel a little bit left out in the cold for a while. But if you wait, it can be rewarding.
Yeah.
But
I think
that's the 6 of 1, half a dozen.
Yeah.
Kind of
I feel like Paragon Paths really felt like a season finale for your character, and then you get really excited about like the first episode of the next season.
Yeah.
As opposed to, but like as for personal character growth, because I made them very like less about like stats and also more about who you are as a person.
I'll literally never forget my like Paragon Path advancement from our first game.
Yeah.
It was so cool.
It was a game changer, literally.
Yeah. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something else from 4th edition that we liked. It's skill encounters. It's kind of, when I use them these days, it's a holdover from 4th edition.
They're still a thing, aren't they?
I don't know that like they are as much. Like, you can do them. You can always run a skill encounter. But Chris, why don't you talk to us about, like, for you, how do you go about creating a skill encounter? And then Emily, if you want to talk about like why you do or don't like them.
Okay, like full disclosure, I don't remember what skill encounters were like in 4th edition.
Okay, I'll lay it out for you. But the basics were, and Chad, if you have opinions, please by all means let me know. But skill encounters are like, you have to you guys are in this situation. You each of you is going to have a turn to offer some kind of skill to getting yourselves out of this situation.
So the same way I always run them. Got it.
If you succeed 3 times before you fail 3 times, then you win the skill encounter, right? Is kind of the vibe.
Yeah.
It helps frame like an event without the event needing to be combat.
Yeah, I think that something that D&D lacks is a way of creating thematic conflict that isn't based around doing damage, right? Like social or action-based thematic set pieces that are not based around depleting other people's hit points. And so I really like being able to try to create like chase scenes or detective intrigue moment, like Batman detective mode, or even like a social encounter where you're having a battle of wits with someone. What I like to do to prevent it from just being a collection of like best 2 out of 3 dice rolls is not allowing people to use I don't know if this is in the book anymore, but allowing people to use the same skill more than once. So it forces the party to diversify their approach as opposed to being like, oh, it's a chase scene, so everyone just spends every turn running as fast as they can. But I still do the same, like, this many successes between this many failures kind of situation.
Know It All brings up something that I think is important and that I do agree with. Skill encounters that don't harbor on some sense of urgency, or that don't hang on some sense of urgency, are just playing the game, right? Like, there has to be some reason that this is exciting or pushing you forward. There's some sort of time limit imposed upon it in order to make it cool. For that reason, I use I don't know where it is.
A timer?
Oh, there it is. Yeah. I use my egg timer? Sands of Time. The Sands of Time.
Whatever, Chromie.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And that means that they just have to come up with ideas and do them fast. And I also find that that's really useful. Like my group that's running Hoard of the Dragon Queen really loves to hem and haw. And sometimes I'm like, whatever you decide by the time this egg timer is over is what you're doing. Because we have to move forward. You wouldn't have this much time. But Emily, what is your thought as a player about skill encounters?
Here's the thing. I don't like them, usually. And here's why. This actually is very, very closely linked to my frustration with like the skill check conversation we were having before. In the scenario where skill encounters are frequently used, so like let's say the players are running. I think actually a better scenario is like the players are running and have to cross a river, let's say. So it's not just about like I run, but it's also like, okay, I have to do an acrobatics check to like leap across the river, whatever.
Right.
In all of those scenarios, it's like, okay, all 5 of the party members are rolling the thing. But if the party isn't gonna just make it, what is the point of the skill encounter? You know what I mean? Like if
it's just like the skill check thing before. If you're not prepared for success and failure, what's the point?
If like there's been so many times where I as a player am sitting through, and this whole conversation makes me sound so complainy, and like I hope I don't give that impression when
we're literally all complaining. But it's not just you.
In these scenarios, I get very frustrated because if we're all just gonna make it in the end, we're spending so much time just rolling
random shit
just to fill the time to make it to the other side of the river. So either it's a skill encounter where there is an option where, because okay, like I'm sorry, I have to like peel off the layers. Here's the part where I get frustrated too, is let's say the 4 players succeed and the 1 player doesn't. So then you have to turn around and like go help the player that fell in the river. Okay.
What happens? Yeah.
What, like there's just so many elements to these where like nothing, it's like the DM is just trying to get you to the place where you finish doing the thing. I think we come into these a lot like with like climbing a wall or crossing a river, or these things where it's like you just got to get to the other side, and the DM can't just say, okay, you go to the other side. I understand that, but when you turn it into a skill encounter where literally it's just we have to tick off the boxes that we did the check just to make it to the other side, that's where
and since failing just protracts the process.
It feels meaningless.
So if you're gonna, I think this is exactly it, and it's something that we've come to a bunch of times during this, like thematically. So I think it's something that I'm certainly getting the most out of this, and it's something that I feel like I know, but hearing it from both sides of the equation is really important, which is simply that everything has to matter, and if it doesn't matter, then don't include it.
Well, I think that
move past it.
On the overall,
you need to have pass and fail mean something.
Yeah, I think my problem is I think that D&D as a system has a serious issue with quantifying failure. because the thing that we just keep on saying from both sides of the table is that failing sucks. It feels, first off, it feels bad to fail because nothing happens when you fail. And what is the point of failure if the DM wants the thing to happen? Then what is the point of failure other than to protract the process in a way that is not fun for anyone involved? So like,
but Chris, I don't want to be like, don't you do this? But I do feel like, especially like within the last, I would say, year, I've been very focused on making sure I have something that happens that's satisfying if players fail versus if they succeed at something. And if that is not something that I can come up with something cool for, then I just let them do it.
Yeah, but the thing is that the rules start to, I mean, this is just a problem I have with the system.
Yeah.
The rules start to break down where it's like, why do I have to jump? The system, I feel like, should be doing some heavy lifting there, as opposed to me having to literally jump through hoops to deal with literally any instance of failure on my player's part. Like, I really want to run this really cool skill encounter where my players have to get on the other side of this raging river with a waterfall, because that is a cool thing from a movie that my players want to do. But if my players fail and one of them goes over the waterfall, then what happens? I don't want that to happen. And like, I could have things happen, but at the end of the day, unless I've hyper planned for that scenario, then that is not going to be an enjoyable thing. It's either just going to go on way too long as I desperately try to come up with excuses for why their failure still allows them to make it, or Emily goes over the falls and then I have to invent an entire other plot about what they do when they go to get her. And then are they just going to go to get her? And do I have her roll skills to go get her, just to get her back up? And then why did I have her fail at all? Why did I even have her roll? Why are we rolling anything, Anne?
What are dice?
Shh. It's okay, everybody. Let's take a deep breath here. So I actually don't think it's that hard to prepare for that. You're trying to get across the river. I treat it like a group check. Everybody brings something to it, and if they fail, then I know that they're going to feel like they're going over the river, and right before they're about to let go of the bridge, out of the water emerges a giant crocodile. And they then have to, on this bridge that is all difficult terrain, and like they have to always have one hand on it, then they have to do a cool encounter that they wouldn't have had to do had they made it across the bridge. The type of planning that requires, it's a little bit more sometimes, but I don't think it's,
What happens if they fail that encounter?
If they die, they die.
I guess I like
at some point.
Well, like, I mean, there are times where it works out well. Like there was a session I was playing with that Emily was a part of the other day, and the players had a situation where they were being chased by giants, and I ran a skill encounter to try to have them get away from these damn giants, and they had a hard streak of failures. Yeah, like they could not roll above a 7 to save their lives, and the campaign kind of went on a very different path because their failure ended up having them fall down a fissure and go completely off the beaten path.
Sure.
You know, and so I did kind of like plan around it, and so in that particular instance, their failure ended up being a much more interesting outcome than if they had simply outpaced or hidden from these giants.
It's very similar to what Know-It-All Saigai just said in chat, and yes, I think basically it comes down to the GM. It's all your responsibility to figure out how to make it interesting. Also, I must comment that I love the meme we have now created of like the pivotal example of the skill encounter is Emily falling down a waterfall. Like,
we don't want it, and it's not fun. No, I mean, I think we've given people a lot to work with as far as like, before you have something happen, like think about how failure and success affects every scenario. Because that will let you know whether your homebrew idea is a good idea or it's busy work.
And if it's not a situation that requires failure or success, if the players need to cross the river and you want them to just decide what are the interesting ways that they're crossing the river, I don't see why that's any different from when you set up camp and it's like, how do you pass the evening? Like, what do you do with your time? Like, just describe it.
Yeah, and I think getting them to talk about like, how do you, like you said, like, so there's this raging river, how are you going to cross it? And having them describe, well, Are there, can I do a survival check to find some wood? Okay, there's not. Well, I do have a rope. Okay, well, somebody can get over to the other side. Just let them get over. And as long as they can describe a way that they, use their wits to get across something, then it doesn't always have to be a skill check. Yeah. I think that might be an unpopular opinion with some, but it's our opinion here.
It's our opinion, gosh darn it.
It's interesting because I was going to bring up earlier that I read a thing a while ago that someone was like, why is it that only charisma-based skills are the skills that you actually have to be good at in real life in order to succeed on? And it's like brings up that thing that at the table, if it's like, okay, I need you to roll in athletics, strength to do X. I don't actually have to be strong enough to push down that door. If I rolled high enough, I push down the door. But if I'm trying to intimidate a guy or persuade him of a thing, it's like, okay, you rolled high enough, but what do you say to him? You know what I mean? And I understand that it's a role-playing game, but also like I've experienced situations where DMs made it more difficult for a player to succeed on something that would require an action that they could perform in real time for them.
Yeah. Well, I will say I feel the opposite a lot of the time because I think I'm pretty good with the words. And I think I should get to succeed if I say the right thing. Even if I don't roll a check
and that's another thing, because like I find there to be a problem with that. If there's someone at the table who is not, as a human being, very charismatic or has good improv skills versus someone else at the table, but they roll high enough, why should I give you an automatic pass just because you are more clever as a person than someone else at the table? Whereas I'd be like, oh yeah, well, you want to roll you want to roll to get a discount on that potion? Well, you actually have to roll because you didn't come up with something clever to say.
Yeah, well, I'm fine. I'm fine with it in the way that like I'm fine with. So it's hard for me to pinpoint this because I think it comes down to rule of cool, right? Which is something we haven't discussed on today's show. If I do an especially good thing, or if I say the one thing that's gonna make this person want to help us, or get them to turn around and fight us because we don't want them to get away, right? I think I should be rewarded for my creativity with that.
And rules written, you just get advantage.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
But which I'm also like semi fine with. But I also think that you can't just be like, oh, you said something flowery, so you get it every time, right? But if you are seeing somebody like come up with a cool-ass poem to woo the love of their life that they finally found and now hates them for whatever reason, and they fucking do it at the table, if you think I'm not going to let that person succeed the same way I would the rogue who describes, like, running across the side of a wall and launching down onto somebody with both their daggers drawn, I'm just going to be like, nah, it's just sometimes storytelling happens and you have to reward it, right? But it has to feel special. Awarding advantage, awarding inspiration, it has to feel special, and if you don't make it feel special, then it stops being meaningful.
I agree 100%. I just wish that the rules supported that ideology more, and I don't feel that they do.
Yeah, I don't, but we're talking about breaking the rules.
Oh, I know.
Chris.
And so I'm saying I agree. Do that.
Yeah.
Do that all the time.
Yeah. But I do think it's hard because sometimes it's harder to like come up with those cool show-stopping combat moments if your character isn't the combattiest combatant, right? Not always, but sometimes it is. Yeah. So if you can do that in other ways, if you're a bard, say, like me, then sometimes we just want a little love too. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about before we wrap things up is what it means to be at 0 HP. Are you unconscious? Are you not?
Wait, what is
Emily,
the rule?
what do you prefer?
What is the
rule is that you're out of the game. If
you're unconscious.
If you are at 0 HP, you are unconscious, and you as a player cannot interact with the world in any way.
Okay, so that's how we play. That's what I thought the rule was, but I don't know, the way you were explaining it made me think.
Well, the thing is that I toy around, but I often forget the rule of if you're at 0 HP, you are still you basically just have to spend your entire turn focusing on not dying.
Yeah.
i.e. holding on to a deep wound, like whatever, hiding, whatever else. And so it takes you out of combat effectively, but you can still speak. You can still be a part of the conversation, which prevents people from just sort of tuning out when they hit 0.
Yeah, I've always pictured it as, that sensation when you're falling asleep and you're like, no, I'm still here. Like those are like the saving throws, right? Like you're not, you can't, you're too far gone to actively engage in conversation.
Oh. Totally.
And you're like teetering on the borders of consciousness.
Yeah. What are all the other Z fighters doing when Goku shows up? Right? They're still there. They might be unconscious because they got sucker punched by Broly or whatever, but like they're still present and can engage in other elements of the narrative, like giving Goku some energy for the Spirit Bomb, whatever, you know. Yeah. So and like the saving throws are like you bleeding out. You know what I mean? So like it takes you 3 turns. Like, do you spend your turn? Like, do you compress that wound hard enough, and things like that? But you'd be able to like speak and.
I don't allow people to speak, but I do allow them to be aware of what's going on.
Yeah, that works too.
And I always think of it as the same way we've been talking about everything else. What if this person fails all 3 and they're dead? What is the coolest story I can help them tell every time they roll? Get them a little bit closer down the path to what they're giving up and what they're losing if they die. So that by the time that last failure comes to pass, even if they're not at the center of the combat at that point, I can create a moment for them that's going to be like them passing into the beyond, that will be satisfying for them.
How do I make their life flash before their eyes as they die?
Literally, though, that's what I think about.
And why are you like this?
Well, because there was this one time I was eaten by a kraken and then it was over, and it really sucked.
Yeah, well, that was well, anyway.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. No.
I wasn't there, but I just want you to know that wasn't my fault.
But it made me not. And listen, I wouldn't have thought about this until like we're not talking about the whole thing, just the act of having a character die and feeling like, am I ever going to get to say like a goodbye to that character actually matters. So just to like, as a DM, I'm constantly thinking about, as they're moving down that weird flow chart of like succeeding and failing, I think of, in my mind, in the moment, I don't plan it, right? But in the moment, I think about what failures mean as they're seeing their life flash before their eyes, and what successes mean, and what's drawing them towards life, and what's pushing them further away.
I've certainly done that in a not as intense of a way as Anne does it. But it's more that like I sort of make the threat of their death omnipresent for everyone involved. So like as to put a narrative ticking clock on their life, because I've dealt with character death a lot, but like, you know, just to like, whether they're doing something or I'm telling them something they're experiencing, or the other players are watching them bleed out in one way or another. You know what I mean? I try to, every time their turn comes around, I try to make it like, oh, they failed that save, and then like describe exactly what they're experiencing physically, and then also what the other players are seeing as that happens, to just kind of make, because I find that some players can just be like, oh, well, they're dying, but I'm sure they got like 3 turns before they die. I'm just going to finish off these goblins. I don't really want that to be the situation.
Well, and Matt says something that is kind of where I'm going with this, but he's saying, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, ladies. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. What do you think about allowing final words or someone dying in another's arms kind of thing? I'm down with that, as long as it is like the fate is written. You know what I mean? The fate is written. And I think that's fine. But it is, as long as everybody at the table is okay with, you know, the fact that once those 3 rolls are failed, like there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
Except for cast revivify or whatever.
Revivify or res. Yeah. So I'm really fine with that. Yeah. I actually like that idea. Like that you're around until the end, because think about how many epic scenes you've had of like heroes that are surrounded by their friends and there's just nothing they can do.
Everyone should get their Boromir.
Yeah, everyone should get the Boromir moment.
Yeah.
Love that.
100%. Boromir is like a perfect example. Like Fellowship is watch Fellowship and break it down like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. And almost every scene in that movie is like directly relatable to the sort of thematic flow that I feel like the creators of this game were imagining. And Boromir is literally a character who fails his saving throws and then dies. And it's crazy, and then just live through that. Like,
Cha says, I've died in a game DM'd by Anne, and it was a life-changing experience in a great way. And then Tate says, Anne's obsessed with near-death experiences, opening up past life experiences. And listen, it is. I love it. I love it. And I'm so glad that that's true. And if you out there in TV land want to play with me, well, I have a Patreon. And I run games for my Patreon community 1 or 2 times a month. And the next ones should be going up pretty soon, so I'll throw that in chat if it's something you're interested in. That being said, guys, we've done it. We've talked for more than our fair share of time. Thank you so much for being on the show again this week. It's awesome to have you.
It's great to be here.
And it's great to be here, Todd. Next week, we are going to be chatting with our good friend Lee. And Lee is going to be on the show to talk about how to support other people at the table in storytelling opportunities. Because I have really not met anybody that has surprised me as much as Lee does at the table. Where, like, she's so supportive of everyone else, and then suddenly she takes... I watched probably almost an hour of roleplay between her and her boyfriend, who is our DM, and it was my favorite show. I felt like my stories were on. You know what I mean? But like it's just really hard. It's really hard sometimes to sit back and find like great ways to enable other people to tell their stories. And I think she's so good at it. So we're going to be focused on that next week, and we'll see you for that. We're going to go ahead and find somebody to raid. If you haven't already, please give us a follow. Hang out. We're just 14 people away from 1,000 followers on this channel.
So freaking close.
So close. So awesome. We have an awesome community over on the Discord where we talk all things D&D and other role-playing games all of the time. So please join us there. You can find me making videos on YouTube every week. I just put out a video all about the new Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, which I'm super, super excited about. And I'm probably in this next week going to be releasing a follow-up to that is all about the new lineages that came out, because that is something I didn't put. I talked about the new class specialties, but I didn't talk about like the half vampire shit they got up to in this new book, and I really want to. So that's probably what's going to be out next week, but there's lots there for you to enjoy. So please, by all means, enjoy it. I will see you next time, everybody. Let's find somebody to raid. I think my good friend Painting Pirate is at it. So let's get over there to Painting Pirate. Let's see.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody. We love you. Bye.